Hello, everybody. Thank you all for coming. We would like to get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. Bob, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, there's Rich. Do you want to say something? Do you want to go?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Rich McGee. I'm the committee mayor. I see a lot of familiar faces. We have some candidates here this evening. That's exciting. And Frida Keogh is our committee woman. Each township has a committee man and committee woman. This is Jefferson Township, not Jefferson County. And there are 26 townships in St. Louis County, and each township has a committee mayor and a committee woman. And they meet every month, the second Wednesday of the month. Where?
Yeah, a year ago. You show up all the time.
I used to be the chairman. And after I stopped being the chairman, because I went to every meeting, I kind of took a sabbatical. So Frida's holding down the fort until I can recoup my strength. It's kind of an exciting organization because it has representatives from all over St. Louis County. It's very interesting to hear different views of residents of St. Louis County. Okay, having said that, we've done the pledge.
Yes.
And I know you got a great program for us. So
I want to say a few
turn it over
things
to
before
you.
we get started. We're going into the summer, so we will not have any meetings for the next June, July, August. In August, we have an election. August 5 is an election. Not hopefully, I will send out information about that election, who is running in that election, and people need to pay attention to who the candidates are, because the August 5 is the primary, and it is election for various different offices. Your election is in November, right?
I have a primary as well.
You have a primary? Okay, so you need to look at all the candidates and make sure you make the right choice. Do you have a primary opponent?
I do.
Okay, so we need to find out who that is and send out information. But I'll try to do it via email. We will not have a meeting until, should we do August or should we do September? What do you think? September?
August is gonna be tough. I think
Right.
better if you wanted to do the June that you talked about. Why don't we just keep people posted? We'll see.
Okay, but we might have a June meeting, but we might
I
not.
don't think we should do July or
Yes,
August.
I would say, would July make more sense since it's close to the primary?
yeah, that's what I'm wondering, to have a meeting right before the election. Well, but we'll think about it. It's not cast in stone.
Right.
So, since there is lots of people running for the various offices, I thought we start tonight with candidates in our area. We have Gina Czetzenik back. She was here very briefly last month, but couldn't talk very long, so Gina is gonna have a few more minutes. She's running for the 90th Legislative Missouri District to replace Rick Stream, who is termed out. And after Gina, we'll let Hasha McQueen talk. She's running for county assessor. And then Rick Stream was gonna be here. However, he said he couldn't make it, but he will send a representative in his place who will not be here until at 7:30, and that's Chris Howard. Chris Howard is going to talk for Rick Stream. Chris Howard, for this past legislative session, was an assistant to the speaker. So he understands Missouri legislature pretty well. He probably needs a job. Anyway, so let's get started. Welcome, Gina.
Thank you all. I'm delighted to be back, and I hope I'm not too laborious in this. I just came back from a big steak dinner. My youngest just turned 16 today. So we went to dinner real quick, and I have to get him driving, so when I'm in Jeff City next year, he has a way of getting back and forth to school. So we are working hard on that. Anyway, I'm Gina Jacksetic, and I am running for the 90th rep district. I will give you a little background. I was here at the last meeting, so told a little. I'll try not to belabor that as well. But I grew up in Kirkwood, moved away, went to school in Nashville, graduated from the School of Nursing at Vanderbilt, and stayed there for 20 plus years. Ultimately set up and ran Vanderbilt's home care program. So spent a big portion of my early nursing career and on into later years working in the community, working with both the pediatric program but our seniors, and have a lot of experience trying to navigate a really complex Medicare, Medicaid healthcare system. My husband and I, married late in life, decided at some point to adopt our 3 lovely children, which we went to Russia and adopted a sibling set. And they were 3, 6, and 9, and they've been with us 12 years. So when we decided to create our family through adoption, neither one of us wanted to be a single parent. Actually, at the time, my husband was living in Kansas City. He's a mechanical engineer and was working for Kansas City Power and Light. He moved to St. Louis, is working with Ameren, and again, we didn't want to be a single parent, so we both met midway, and for me, it was returning home to Kirkwood. So we brought our 3 children here, and I've been here since 2002. Once I got them settled, I went back to work, and currently I just celebrated my 10 years at my current employer, which is a specialty pharmacy in Earth City. So started out with 2 pharmacists, and we now have grown the business. It's close to a $150 million business in 10 years. So had both a lot of experience in working from a startup business in home care. I was the startup manager for that program, worked there for 17 years, grew that employee base to, I think by the time I left, we were around 300 employees, and took a little time off, settled my family in, and then did something similar and starting up the pharmacy business. In the meantime, somewhere in there, I didn't think I had enough to do, so I ran for city council and was elected first in 2008 in Kirkwood and was reelected in 2012. So thought I was on a pretty good path and working in city government. I've had a lot of experience working with great folks in Kirkwood. Then I got a call, and the wagons were circled, and they asked me to run for state rep. So I spent a lot of time working with family and close friends and confidants and great community leaders, and ultimately decided to throw my hat in the ring. So started towards the latter part of March, have really begun to look at obviously taking whatever steps I needed to take to really throw my hat in the ring and run. It's a new experience for me. I think I have a lot of kind of political experience just through the local level, the city council, realize that at the state, very different. And what it's going to take for me to get there is going to be very different than the city council. I need all the help I can get, both in going door to door, introducing me to neighbors, fundraising, organizing over the next several months. My opponent, some of you may know, Deb Lavender, who's been running for 7 years now. Yes, so I have no primary opponent in the August one. Obviously I'll be on the ballot, but the November one, Deb will be on. So she's been to each door many times. She's been out there lots, and she's lost the last 3 elections and attempts. So hopefully, I can gather support and gather a base fairly quickly and, win this race. My expertise, I really believe that I'm bringing to the state and representing the citizens of this district really comes into healthcare. I graduated from Vanderbilt in 1980, so I have over 30 years of healthcare experience and have seen many iterations of healthcare and application of it. The current job I have, I do a lot of Medicare business, but we also operate, we have 47 Medicaid provider status. So I work with Medicaid beneficiaries really in all 50 states, on some of it in specialty programs, but really concentrated in 45 to 47 of those. So I have, I think, a pretty broad knowledge and base and understanding of how government healthcare works, good, bad, and ugly. And now we're starting to see that transition to some of the private sector. Obviously, the impact of Obamacare, the ACA, some of the Medicaid questions and controversy. I think I have quite a bit of experience in things that I think I can bring to the table. Other areas of interest, again, my background in just helping to build businesses, small business, working with small business owners. I think I bring a lot of expertise there. And then with my 3 children in transitioning into the education system, both what it took for us to bring them from Russia and language needs and some of the basic education pieces that were missing, especially in my 2 older ones who were at that time 6 and 9, almost 7 and 10. So we spent a lot of time in using special resources and programs in the public school system, which were very supportive and really helped tremendously. And then also my 2 older ones, Max just graduated from the Army and Anna graduated from Kennedy. Given their entry and what they needed, by the time they reached high school, we needed a little different programs for them. Victor, the one who just turned 16, is a freshman at Kirkwood. So we have a lot of experience, I think, within the education system, and especially not that they were special needs, but they had special circumstances and challenges that we had to overcome not only as a family, but as a school community and as a community at large. I'm excited about the opportunity. I also have an 85-year-old father who he wasn't too happy about me running for city council, but he was all in for this one. So it's been great to have family support, and I look forward to it. And again, need as much help as I can get, and I'm looking forward to the race and winning.
Later on, bring your list and we'll all sign up for your heart signs. Do you have any signs or anything? St. Peter's has their picnic.
Yes, and I am a member at St. Peter's, so
Yeah.
I'll be there. And I do have some brochures and cards that we are kind of getting up and running. I should have a staff member full-time, or not quite full-time, but close to it by the beginning of next week. And that way they'll help me coordinate a lot of the activities, the yard signs, call list if people can make phone calls.
Yes. Walking around the picnic or something.
Yes, I think I got, actually, my Gina Jack said it, state rep buttons, or stickers, things, so the kids will have to wear them and everybody else.
Yes, your own name to put in the window there with Eric Schmidt and Rich.
We are working on that.
Well, that doesn't sound like yes.
We are, because you know what, Eric and Ann Wagner share that space, so getting, arrangements to do that. They're very generous in their support. They're very willing to give me space in there, and so we're just kind of working out the details.
Window space.
Yeah, window space.
That is good window location, yes.
Yes.
Is Eric running for something now?
Well, Eric doesn't come up for 2 more years, he's got 2 more years
Oh,
left.
2 more years?
And he's, I think Eric's exploring lots of options. So he still has 2 more years. He won't have another
Okay.
Senate race, but he'll have
Yeah, I know
others.
it's term limited. I didn't know there's 2 more years. Oh,
Yeah,
that's good.
they're on a 4-year.
One in 2008, one of the only Republicans that won.
Yeah. He did a great job, yes.
Right, Robin,
Yeah, so we hope to be able to capitalize in that kind of space as well. Other questions? And
Gina, if you were to win, just theoretically, and you could focus in on 2 specific areas that you would like to have an impact on, what would those 2 areas be?
really, the healthcare, I tell you, I have really major concerns about the government creep into our healthcare system and kind of the takeover of it. So I think the state needs to begin to protect their citizens by really making sure that decisions that we're making about the healthcare system and the delivery of it is a state to individual choice and not a federal mandate. So there's many concerns in the healthcare arena. And I think more and more as we see the federal trying to control decisions at the state level, I think we need to begin to make sure that the state is an independent body and we make the decisions for our residents. You know, whether it's in education, whether it's in healthcare. You know, I think more and more we're seeing federal government creep into state law, to the lives of the citizens in our state. So I think, again, some of that creep, you know, and the Common Core I know is kind of a big issue, but it's amazing the amount of data they want to create and collect on us from our healthcare, from our education to our children. And at what point do we really have privacy in this country? I don't know. So I think we need to start relying on ourselves. We need to support each other in our communities, and we need to rely less and less on the federal government, and even to some degree less and less on the state government.
The managing editor of the Webster Groves and Kirkwood newspaper is very strong on this issue of expansion of Medicare, and he writes on the subject, and I'm sure at some point he'll begin to throw things at you. Have you met him? How do you plan to handle that fellow?
My experience with the Kirkwood Webster Times has really been through the city council activity, and so, you know, I tend on the council to be a little bit more of a rebel than everybody else, but they've been pretty nice to me. Dennis is the beat writer that covers Kirkwood, and so I haven't had too much trouble. I anticipate they'll really, you know, start going on the attack with the, because of running for the state. You know, the Medicaid expansion, and I don't want to take up a lot of time, but that is fraught with problems for the state, both in taking on ultimate expenses that we're not going to be able to sustain. Again, we keep trying to throw entitlement programs at citizens instead of finding ways of putting people to work. Obamacare gives you ways of buying your health care coverage, so why do we need, you know, additional Medicaid programs put in place? So I think we need to really look at and focus on putting people to work, having them, you know, giving them opportunities to purchase their own insurance or get it through their employers, and not just keep throwing additional benefits that make it harder and harder for you to ever become the independent person that I think most people really want to be. And if you look at the problems with Medicaid right now, and people who currently are eligible can't get through the lines to get signed up. I mean, there's newspaper article after newspaper article that talks about the complexities of even getting enrolled in Medicaid. And you know, that infrastructure is not there to support the current population. So we're going to throw more people into a chaotic system that doesn't work to begin with. I mean, that doesn't seem like a very good answer either. And I can tell you about, there is a difference between the way my patients get service under a Medicare or Medicaid program and the way they get service under a private insurance program. There's a huge difference. So under Medicare, if you get sick, make sure you get sick according to the government guidelines. Because if you don't get sick in that box, you don't get access to care. And I see it every day in we're a CF pharmacy, and you have access to a drug for a lung infection called Pseudomonas. If you have CF, or if you have bronchiectasis, if you have ALS, if you have other respiratory disorders, and you need Toby, you don't get it if you're Medicare. Unless you want to pay for it, it'll cost you $8,000 every other month. So you have to have the right diagnosis to get the drug. And the drug doesn't treat bronchiectasis, it treats Pseudomonas. But because you don't have Pseudomonas with the right underlying disease, you don't get access for care unless you pay cash. So get sick with the right diagnosis and the right treatment. And that happens every day. And Medicaid does the same thing. One other quick question.
One more question.
Yes.
You said that people are having trouble signing up for Medicaid.
Mhm.
Did you mean signing up for the Affordable Care Act?
No, the recent paper article said just those trying to go through the application process for Medicaid. The caseworkers are overloaded. They're having a hard time getting appointments or getting their paperwork through the system. As a provider, to get paperwork through the system, for patients to do it, it's a nightmare. Our regulatory burden is overwhelming.
So what would you do to streamline that?
Well, I think it starts from the understanding at not the top down, but the bottom up. What happens when somebody goes into these offices and they can't, or what happens for them to even get an appointment? So you gotta figure out what's happening to get access and then figure out where the barriers are going up the ladder.
So you're in favor of Medicare and Medicaid, you just kind of make it easier for people to
Right.
get?
I want to make sure that those programs are utilized appropriately and people have access. So let's strengthen that, give people access to that accordingly, and then look at where can we supplement, what other kind of, if we kind of begin to work those, we get people back to work, we help them find ways of securing private coverage, and then where do we still, Medicaid's a safety net program. It shouldn't be the first step. So we have to figure out all of those barriers at the access point, and then figure out where do we still need the safety net. We're creating safety nets because access is so difficult here, so let's create it over here and see if that works any better. Well, if it didn't work here, I doubt it's gonna work over there.
But it shouldn't be expanded in Missouri.
I think at this point, no. But, we need to understand what's happening within the program. And again, I won't go into the VA hospital, but then you look at the debacle at the VA hospital.
Another topic.
Yeah, I mean, that's government health care. And we truly have people dying because they don't have access to care. That makes no sense.
And it's not the money, they got plenty of money.
It's not the money, it's we pigeonhole you, you have to be in this box, and if you don't fit in that box, sorry. It's scary.
We have 700 people dying in Missouri every year who, because the state has not expanded Medicaid.
But is Medicaid gonna be the answer? I mean, we have people who
For
don't.
those 700 every year, yes.
Yeah, but we have so many people who have the ability to sign up for Medicaid and don't. So what happens to all those who do qualify for Medicaid and don't
And
sign
don't
up?
sign up.
What about those who have access to health care, insurance and other arenas and don't sign up?
Okay, thank you very much, Gina.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tasha McQueen. Tasha is running for county assessor.
That's a great segue though, Gina. I know that a lot of us probably watch the news a lot, correct? And we feel so overwhelmed by everything that's going on. And we feel like somehow we've lost control at some point, and the federal government has infringed and has crept into our lives more and more. And somehow we just wake up and it seemed like it happened overnight, but we all know it didn't. It starts at the local level, and this is where it starts. The people that you put into these positions are the ones that are going to go forward. And I believe that the reason why we have such a mess in Washington is because people have not paid enough attention to local races and who they send there. You have to make a change brick by brick, and it starts right here. And everybody in this room agrees with that, and they know that because you guys are here, right? Otherwise you wouldn't be here. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. My name is Hasha McQueen, and it's spelled with a J, so don't get confused. Fell down. Alright, there it is. I'll put it here. For some reason, this doesn't hold it. Okay, so it's spelled with a J. The J is like an H. My mother is from South America, so I'm Hispanic. My father is from Illinois. And not Peru, Illinois, because that's where my mother's from. And I'm bilingual, and I've grown up in a bicultural household, which was a challenge. Anybody who's in a bicultural relationship or in a bicultural household knows what I'm talking about. My parents, when they met, they didn't know how to speak each other's language, and they got married within 6 months, and they're still married, believe it or not. So I have a very strong family background. I was in the Army for 5 years, and I served that. My father was 25 years in the military. So I grew up all over the world. And believe it or not, I like St. Louis the best out of anywhere I have lived. And that's an interesting statement because sometimes I find people who are natives here, and they're like, St. Louis. But it is the best of both worlds, really. You can have a little bit of country, you can have a little bit of city, and you can still raise your family here and not worry about, all the drama that comes with raising your family. So I decided to run for assessor. It was 3 days before the filing deadline, and Ed Martin actually was the one who contacted me and said, would you consider running? I was not thinking about running for anything, trust me. I'm fine with my workload. I am an entrepreneur, business owner as well. I'm an attorney, and I am a mother of 3 children. One who's 8 months old, just born, and who has special needs. He's got Down syndrome. So I have my hands full. So this was not anything I was really considered doing. But with the dynamics and the way that the race is now in St. Louis County, I believe Republicans have an opportunity to win. And particularly the incumbent now, who's the assessor, he won in April of 2011 in a special election where it was a very, very low turnout, and all of his friends showed up to vote for him. So I think that this could really be a good race, and I believe it's a winnable race. So after my assessment and talking to my parents and my family, I decided to go ahead and do it because I figure politics is something like having children. It's never a good time, right? You never plan on it, you just do it. So here I am. So far it has been drinking from a fire hose. I've had a lot of people though very helpful and very, very gracious with their time to assist me. So I'm very appreciative, and of course I'm appreciative of you guys taking your time out to come here and listen to me speak. I want to tell you a little bit about myself as far as what I consider important. Assessing sounds really boring, right? I mean, it's like assessor, numbers, value of houses, value of property, but it is very, very important. It is what brings in the money into the county. The rates that are charged are done by a separate office. However, the value of your house and the value of your property is assessed by the county assessor. So I'm a business owner, and I understand what taxes can do to you. I am a single mom of 3, okay? Many years ago, I'll tell you a little story about myself. Many years ago, I was working for a very large firm in town. And I decided, like a crazy person, to go out on my own and start my own law firm. And I did that. It was 2009. I was supporting my entire family at the time. I was married at the time. My husband was not working. And I went from making a good living to a not so good living, all within a matter of months. I know how to operate in a lean environment, trust me. I've had to do it. I understand the normal problems that people have and the impact of the economy on people, because I've had to deal with it. 2009, the economy wasn't as strong. It's still arguably not as strong, but. So 2009, I went out on my own, and I took a big chance on whether or not I was going to be able to make it and to provide for my children. A year later, I became the victim of domestic violence at the hands of my husband. And I was the only person in my law firm that was there. I was the only attorney. And I had to go forward, suck it up, and make it happen. And I did. I remember the night that it happened, the very next day I got a restraining order. And that weekend, I had 2 huge projects I had to get done. And I had my twin boys, they're 6 years old now, looking at me, you know, and I had to make it happen. So I know and I understand over the past several years, you know, I understand real issues. I'm not somebody who has lived in a pristine environment and have had everything handed to me. I'm not that person. I do understand common sense. And sometimes when people get into these political positions, common sense goes out the window for some reason. And all of a sudden you're in a different environment and everything changes. But I believe that is a disservice to the people that you're serving. Because if you don't understand the difficulties of life and how that impacts your decisions, impact people. It was hard to write a check to the IRS when I was figuring out who to pay first, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that have to do that. And you know, you don't want to make Uncle Sam mad, so you got to write him a check. But to me, this position is near and dear to my heart because it deals with something that will have a direct impact on every single person in this room. And I plan on doing an excellent and common sense job if I'm there. All this mystery that is shrouded in these evaluations, and nobody, I mean, does anybody here really know how to come up with these numbers? You know, some people may, but majority of people don't, you know? And why is that? I mean, what's the mystery, right? It should be explained in a common sense fashion. And we shouldn't be increasing the size of the office, because I believe that's what the incumbent did. You know, we should streamline it. We should make it as lean as we can so that all of us can keep some of our money to use for us. It's our money anyway, and it's our property. So that's my perspective. We are going to be rolling out in June, in the next week, hopefully. We'll get all of our brochures and literature out. And I hope that everybody here can assist me with my race, because again, it impacts everybody here. I'll entertain any questions if anybody has any. Yes?
What are the 2 attributes you have that make you feel like you'd be the best assessor?
Well, assessors is very statute driven.
Right.
The position. So the fact that I'm an attorney in and of itself does give me some experience. I've also had a lot of experience doing real estate transactions and otherwise in my practice. So I'm familiar with that area, and I believe that gives me qualifications for it. But I do also have a very strong sense of being treated fairly. I think we all need to be treated fairly. And you want an assessor that understands that. Yes.
You were talking about paying the Uncle Sam, but you haven't had any problems with paying your real estate taxes, right?
Well, I will tell you, no. Oh, you're asking about that, no.
That was the problem with the last
No.
candidate we had.
No, I always pay the government, no.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
no worries, no worries there, no. I always pay the government, and that was my other, was that, you have to pay the government first. Yeah, no worries there. I wasn't paying other people at some point. Well, I've always paid people, but it's been late, I mean, like the past, when all of that went down, there was just a lot of issues that I had to get through. But I got through them, so.
And on a personal level,
Yes.
we really don't own our property as long as we have to pay these taxes on it, and if we don't pay them, they take our property from us.
I know. And that's another overwhelming kind of idea that has been inserted.
Right.
Okay. I think you had your hand up.
Two-part question. One, what would happen to your law practice if you were elected assessor? And two, where do you stand on Aberdeen Heights?
Aberdeen Heights, I'm not sure what
That's
that.
a retirement.
Oh, the retirement home. Okay, so let me get to your first question. I do have a partner in my law firm now, so he would be taking over my firm. And your second one about Aberdeen Heights. I am.
One McKnight Place and other retirement.
Yeah, you're talking about the retirement homes. And I think currently they are exempt, correct?
Aberdeen.
Well,
Aberdeen.
they're
No, a lot
nonprofit,
of-
but you pay $1 million
A lot.
to get in.
A lot of retirement homes are not.
Except for a few. Those,
Friendship villages.
interestingly enough, I've been speaking to other county assessors. I spoke to Warrenton County Assessor this week. And interestingly enough, the tax exempt status that's given to particular are individual and they're subjective. And it's much more subjective than, let's say, even property taxes. Because property taxes, they have a guideline, so if you have a car that's this, it's a certain price, it's a certain year. But with tax exemptions, like if they're gonna exempt them from being assessed, that's done on an individual basis. So you can have one retirement home that qualifies, and then you go to the other one, it doesn't. Now, when I had spoke with the county assessor of Warrenton, she said, well, if you're paying rent, if they're receiving income from it, then she said they should be paying property taxes, or it should be assessed. So, but again, I don't know enough about it, but I'm in the process of learning about it. So I can't really give you a good answer right now, but that's kind of the framework, the fact that it's subjective, the fact that, you can go from one retirement home to the next, and it just depends on on what the specific circumstances are. Yes.
If you win the primary, and I hope you do, you are going to face another attorney.
I am.
And in the last election, Mr. Zimmerman was talking about reducing the costs of running that assessment office, introducing efficiency. He spoke very nicely, but as soon as he was elected, he brought in 4 of his friends,
Yeah.
and he gave them salaries in the range of $88,000 to $90,000, and that was not visualized by the people even who supported him.
Yeah.
And the question will be raised in the election as to efficiency in running that program, how I'm going to face it.
Yeah. Well, I love efficiency and I love lean operations. But again, this is what I'm used to at my law firm, and during those times where it was a little bit tumultuous for me, I really had to bear down and be lean. And I think the problem with certain people when they get in those positions is, number one, he's a politician. He he's been in the House, he knows how to talk, he knows how to convince everybody, he wants your vote. And then once they get in there to do something completely different, well, you don't have that problem with me because I'm not a politician. I mean, I am who I am, right? And I understand, I've been there and I've done that. And so I agree that you're going to get that a lot from people. Some people are going to say things that they don't mean. I've talked to several other, actually I talked to one other assessor out near Kansas City. And he told me, he said, I am going to make this office lean, and he got rid of people. No, he got rid of people, he got a smaller staff, they came up with a plan operationally, and he said, but he told me, he said, it's hard, it's not easy, you know, it's not an easy thing to do. And I think when you have a mentality of you're using other people's money, you tend not to be as worried about it if you're using somebody else's. You give me $10, I'll go buy myself something nice with $10, I won't think about it. But if it's my own $10, then I start thinking about it, right? So it's the same idea, it's the same concept. But yes, I believe in efficiency, I believe in streamlining that office, and that's what I'll do when I get in there.
Just one quick thing. I live on a cul-de-sac of 14 houses that were built probably within a period of 4 years. This last assessment, we have fought our assessments every 2 years. 1 year, all 14 of us fought our assessments. My house was reduced $150,000. That's how, I mean, it's ridiculous. This past year, the 4 houses that were closest to Berry Road did not go up. The other 8 houses did. There is no rhyme or reason, what you were saying. There's some secret, I don't know if they just pull us out of a hat or what, but I would like to see a process that makes sense, that you don't have to live in fear every 2 years when you open that bill and your property tax jumps up $2,000. I mean, that's ludicrous. And the other thing is, for elderly people who don't know how to use the internet and to go in and to have to go to a formal hearing, it's really discriminatory to older people.
Oh, yeah.
And it's overwhelming, and it's very time consuming. So that's just, you know, I don't really have any, you don't have to answer that, but that is a process that really needs to be changed.
It's very
in the
bureaucratic.
county. It
Very
is.
bureaucratic, and a lot of red tape.
Yes, it is. And having to do a formal hearing every 2 years is just, it's a waste of time, and there's something rotten in the process. When, I mean, our houses were assessed at $200 a square foot, and in Glendale, the average is $150 selling price. So we're still assessed way high for what
For
we
that
can
area.
yeah.
And you know, and you bring up a really good point, because this does hit certain areas more than other areas, okay? So like, let's talk about North County, for example. And there's a lot of foreclosures, a lot of bank sales. They're actually getting ripped off up there in North County, because if you buy something for if you buy a house for $30,000, you know, you can get assessed anywhere from $60,000 to $90,000 for that house, even though you purchased it for $30,000. So there's examples, and I would encourage anybody who has stories like this to please reach out to me and let me know, because we are in the collection phase right now of investigating and collecting as much information as we can about particular stories like yours. And if there's certainly a pattern emerging from what we're able to see so far.
Pasha, can you tell us anything about your primary opponent?
I do not know much about him. I know that he ran as a Democrat years ago. He has been, and that's why the Central Committee actually endorsed me a few weeks ago, which is unheard of. They don't do that in a primary. But they did it particularly because of this guy's record and that he had run as a Democrat. So that's all I know, really. I know he ran for Pattonville School Board in April, just recently, and he lost. He came in last.
He likes to run for office.
He does, and I think he also made some statement to one of the committee township people saying that he wasn't going to have a candidate committee or anything. He was just going to do it on Facebook or something. I'm not sure if he's really running or not.
Thank you.
But thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Chris Howard. He's the stand-in for Rick Stream. Rick Stream is the current rep for the 90th district, and he was the budget director, had a very active role. And Chris Howard is going to talk a little bit about the wrap-up of the session, and a little bit about Rick's candidacy.
Yeah, so I guess my name is Chris Howard, and like a lot of people involved in politics, I wear lots of hats. And so for legal issues, I'm going to wear one hat, I'm going to turn around, catch that on film, and then I'm going to fill in another role. Does that make sense? For ethic reasons. First off, Rick apologized, he couldn't be here tonight. He had to speak at middle school graduation, and he just couldn't get out of that. So I hope you'll, first off, forgive him. And I guess as I start off, I'm on the Republican State Party Committee. So for the first few minutes, I'm going to talk for wearing that hat, so we're all real clear. And we'll kind of go from there. First off, Rick, being the budget chairman is not an easy gig. And for a couple months of the year, it's tougher than being the Speaker of the House. It's a tough thing. So you probably are asking yourself, well, what's Rick doing for his campaign? Because you probably haven't seen anything. Well, after he recovered from no sleep for 3 months in the session, and I think you'll start to see kind of a gear up on it. I talked to him briefly earlier tonight. So I don't want you to think he's doing, somebody said a Facebook campaign. I think we know Rick is well above that. And so, like I said, I want to offer my apologies on behalf of Rick who couldn't be here. And from a campaign standpoint, just to let you know that you will start to see things gear up. Now as the official obligations wind down, unless of course the governor calls a special session, we'll get to that in a minute. But he wants you to know that he's on top of it, and you'll start to see a flurry of activity as money's raised and all that other kind of stuff. I did also want to mention, from the purely political side of things, the official turnaround here in a minute. I work in Jeff City, which is kind of exciting, and it's also really tedious at times. And I see a lot of people come up, a lot of activists, a lot of people very concerned about what's going on, and they waste their time. I kid you not, I had a group come into my office. They were very excited. They were there to lobby to convince the legislature to do X. Well, that issue had been voted on the day before. Yeah. I almost really felt I felt really tore up. I didn't know how to tell them that they wasted the time.
You're a day late.
Yeah, literally, a day late and a lot of dollars wasted. So the reason I tell you that little tidbit is I am offering kind of an activist class. This isn't a campaign school. It's not how to get elected. There are plenty of people that do that. I've helped on those levels. This is really a 5-part class on how to advance your agenda in the Missouri legislature. The first one will be an overview, and it will cover basic structure. It will cover how to be an asset, how to be seen as an asset by your legislator. Rick gets 1 million phone calls and emails during the budget session. And then as soon as that's done, it's like ghost town in his office for a while. All right, so then it's like he has no friends. And then you call and say, well, hey, Rick, I want you to do X. Well, where were you when I needed you? Kind of a thing. So the first part is going to kind of talk about how to be seen as an asset, not a pest, how to work with your legislator, how to understand how the system works. The second part will be held in Jefferson City, and it will be what I call the not 4th grade version of how a bill becomes a law in Missouri, but what I call the NC-17 version. Okay? And the reason it's going to be held in Jefferson City is because the clerk's office in the House will actually help conduct most of that class on everything from how the committee structures work, how the budget process works, and I'll get more into kind of the budget piece of it here in a minute, but how that works, how any number of people along the way can kill a bill, advance a bill, stop a bill, ruin a bill. That's usually done in the Senate, by the way. Don't tell Eric I said that. The Senate can mess up anything. The next part will be working with lobbyists. How to work with them, how to work against them, how to work with the press. I've got several lobbyists and some press people in the House Communications Director who's going to help with that. Then the next one's going to be real interesting. How to plan a trip to Jefferson City so you don't show up about a day late. How to make an appointment, how to research the bill, how to research where it's at in the process, how to know who the committee chairs are and whatever. And then the final part of it is you're going to plan your trip to Jeff City, because then we're going to go to Jeff City as a group on the first day of veto session. And then we're going to see if you can execute your plan. Now I tell you all that, one, because I'm doing this class and we can get the information to you if you're interested. But back to Rick, I cannot tell you the number of people who have walked into his office and asked for something in the budget, and they have no clue. They have no idea what goes into that, how the appropriations committees work. They believe everything that the press tells them. We'll get to that in a minute. And so they waste their time, and it's sad. We talked about efficiency. I impose order on anything I can find, and it saddens me, even with the people who I disagree with. I should be happy that they've wasted their time, because then they're not working against the things that I believe in. It still saddens me that they wasted time. It's not a good thing. So I wanted to mention that to you, and again, you'll be hearing more from Rick on the campaign side on that. So now I'm going to do the turnaround. The reason I do that is because, as I said, I work in the House of Representatives. I'm the Deputy Legislative Director to the Speaker of the House. And while you should have had Rick, who knows more than I do, I can dish more dirt than he can. So we'll get to that in a minute. He asked me to do kind of an overview of the session. We were 45 bills short of the record of the most filed bills in any session. I'm not going to go through all of them. So we'll only talk about the ones that passed that we like. How's that? Now, Frida said I could take all night to talk. I'm not going to do that, so don't worry. So I'm going to run down a few of these bills and some of the big things that were accomplished. I know there's going to be lots of questions on Medicaid expansion and why that didn't happen, which is fine. I can answer questions on that. Probably the transfer bill, whether or not that's actually going to be vetoed, which the governor says he is. So we'll kind of go through that. A couple of big things. I know, I wanted to mention this first. I want to go back to one thing. We talked about the assessor's race and how unfair it is for people to appeal. Rich McGee, I know, has done classes years past and has been very instrumental in helping people through that process. And we need more people like him to step up and help people who need it. And I don't know if you still do those or not, Rich, but I know you did for years and years helping people through that process.
Various townships.
Right.
Also.
Yeah. So, we have people that are willing to step up and help, so that will be important. So I just want to throw that out there. So how many lawyers do we have in the room other than Rich? Wait a minute, we got her. Okay, so this year, for the first time in a 3-year, truly bipartisan process, the criminal code was revamped, cleaned up, straightened out. The governor threatened to veto it. Everybody ignored him. He didn't veto it because he didn't have votes, which, by the way, is a theme throughout whatever else I'm going to say. But yeah, so that was a huge task. It's pages upon pages of criminal code that was cleaned up, long overdue, that needed to happen. This is not a 1-year process. Stanley Cox, state representative, did a major hard work on that bill. How many of you are aware that we passed, I say we because I speak for the Speaker's office, I didn't do anything, but passed the cannabis oil for people with epilepsy and seizures. Now, I know that people are like, oh, we just legalized marijuana. No, we didn't. But that was kind of a big, a big human concern issue. I took a meeting in the Speaker's office and I met a young man, I want to say he was 7 or 8, and literally has seizures about every 4 minutes. His life expectancy is already half over. That he won't, and nothing, no drug, nothing has worked, and this may be the only thing that can help him out. So that was passed. Representative Kevin Elmer's bill and I'm sure you've heard a lot about the 72-hour waiting period bill. That was that bill is a big pro-life measure that kind of went through. The big one, Senate Bill 509, that was the tax cut bill. The governor, I don't know why he did this. Well, I guess he didn't have a choice, Constitution. He vetoed it early enough in session that we were able to override it during session. By the way, if you're keeping score, I think there have been 25 or 26 veto overrides of governors in the history of the state of Missouri. When 509 was overridden, Governor Nixon owns 13 of those. And the hits are going to keep coming. Yeah, they're not done. There'll be more overrides for us. He is the most overridden governor in the state of Missouri's history. Broad-based tax relief is the first time in over 90 years that there's been a tax cut or in a reevaluation of the tax code. It's not a lot. We couldn't get a lot. A lot wouldn't pass, so we got a little. But now that the door, for people who don't realize this, when you do legislation, listen, sometimes you get one really good whack at the ball, and it may only get you to first base, but that's going to be the best pitch you get. But now that you're on base, you get to hit again. So next year, you'll see the subject come up again. And again, as I go through some of these bills, that'll be a theme. You'll see some of these things return. Fulton Hospital, this was a huge ongoing deal. If you've heard the horror stories out of that place, that is a long overdue overhaul. That's $198 million in bonds to build a more modern facility. Yeah, bonds cost, they're not free. But if you know anything about that situation, that needed to be done. Economic development, I'm just going to run on a few highlights here. These are increased items in the budget, so the budget's a huge deal. $4.5 million for matching funds for early stage business development grants, $5 million for the Missouri Technology Corporation, $400,000 for certified work-ready communities, and $8.5 million increase to tourism. The speaker, my boss, so I have to say this, or I get in trouble. His bill on ending the economic border war with Kansas. You're aware that that basically regulates the TIF financing, so you're not moving businesses across the border back and forth, and it ends up costing taxpayers, and the businesses make a lot of money, but the taxpayers still lose. Unemployment benefits, this was a Senate bill, but the General Assembly approved it. So that allowed jobless benefits to be claimed for up to 20 weeks when the state's average is around, unemployment is at least 9%. So that adds the number of people who can continue on that. And listen, I'm all for cutting the budget, shrinking government, so is the speaker, but when the economy is this bad, and has been this bad, cutting people at that end off doesn't really help. So they did that. Education, you want to talk about education? So Gretchen's back there. I'm ready to talk to her about education.
Thank you.
Okay, so here's the budget highlights in education. Now, the press will tell you that we cut education funding. The Republican legislature has not cut education funding since it's been in control. That's a lie. Didn't happen. What they're telling you is that the foundation formula says that it should be $650 million more than what it is. We haven't been able to fund the foundation formula fully, and if we did, we'd be cutting, I-70 would become a gravel pit because we couldn't afford to pave the roads. Unfortunately, your legislators have to make hard decisions. But for the press to say that education funding was cut is a lie. We spent less, we budgeted less than the governor wanted. We'll get to that in a minute. Just real quick, $278 million increase for the foundation formula, so it's still $650 million short, but 278 more. And then Rick Stream and his team on the budget with Tom Flanagan and Representative Sue Allen, who's out in Tanna Country, did something that we've never done before in terms of the budget. When the governor gave his proposal at the State of the State address, he predicted growth at I think at 2.8 or 3% over last year. The legislature, along with the economists at the University of Missouri-Columbia, said there's no way that's going to happen. And so they budgeted it at 2%. The The reality is already less than that. If you've heard the news story about how tax refund checks have been slowed down, they're not coming out as fast, that's because revenue is down. Gambling revenue's way down, other revenue's down, so that slows that process. So we're already at a point where the revenues are under the projection that the Republicans and the economists picked. The governor's number's way out there. So I just wanted you to know that. But what they did was they said, if the governor's right, seriously, we gave them the benefit of the doubt, said if the governor's correct, they set up for the first time in our history a secondary budget. So when you read, when the budget reaches, revenue reaches a certain trigger amount, this new authorization spending kicks in, and it kicks in for education, and it kicks in, it's $163 million surplus revenue that would go to education if those revenue estimates are hit. Now, we've had supplemental budgets, we've done all those kinds of things, but it's the first time that any of the budget chairs have previously, Republican or Democrat, have said, you know what, if the revenues are really great and they do this thing, you know, they hit this trigger, then we'll kick in without having to call a special session or reauthorize and do all this other stuff. We'll set it, built it in. Pretty nice. I mean, it's pretty good. I don't think we're going to hit it, unfortunately, but okay. So education funding, $29 million increase for First Steps, $10 million increase for transportation, $1 million increase for parents as teachers, $1 million increase for teachers for merit. That's all just K through 12 education. Higher education got a 5% increase at core universities and community colleges, $6 million in equity funding for community colleges, full ride loan forgiveness for Bright Flight recipients who stay and work in the state, which is kind of a big deal. $15 million increase for Access to Missouri Scholarship Program, and a $6.7 million increase for the A+ Scholarship Program. We didn't cut education funding. It didn't happen. Common Core Reform Bill. So we joined the number of states who said Common Core is probably not going to be the program that we use. Now, the thing that's interesting about that is I think the new thing is called Missouri Standards. And the interesting thing about the way this law is put into place is the Speaker, the President Pro Tem of the Senate, is it the Lieutenant Governor as well? Or just the Governor? Do you remember?
For what?
For the committee.
Lieutenant Governor, I believe.
Lieutenant Governor each get to select a number of citizens to appoint to the Standards Committee, basically to ensure that we don't give Google everything they want in terms of stealing all of our kids' data, and that the education standards actually reflect decent standards, which is kind of interesting. The school transfer bill. Okay, deep breath. I will tell you that the school transfer bill is not a great bill. Not a fantastic bill. It may not even be completely a good bill. But I will tell you this with absolute certainty. It is the first time in my political awareness in this state that key Democrats and key Republicans have sat down on numerous occasions and worked together to hammer out some sort of a compromise. Like I said earlier, you know, this is getting on first base. Here's the funny part. For those who haven't been paying attention, the sticking issue is the private school option. Okay? So, of course, the press is like, oh, we're going to give money to Christian schools and we're going to give money to all this other stuff. That's not true. The reality is that if you look at all the specific requirements in the bill, I think there are 3 private non-sectarian schools in the entire state of Missouri that qualify, and they're all in St. Louis County. That's it. And I think only one of them will actually end up potentially getting 1 or 2 students. So the idea that the floodgates have been kicked open to give away all this private money or public money to private schools is not an accurate statement. What's that?
Why aren't they pushing it so much then?
Why aren't they?
Why are they?
Well, it
It's
was.
gonna affect 3 schools in the whole state.
Yeah, well, here's 3 private schools meet the eligibility requirements.
Yes, right.
Here's the deal, and this is the part that I never would have seen coming. Senator Maria Chappell-Nadell, African American, St. Louis City, insisted upon it. It was a Democrat who put it in the bill, and a Democrat who insisted upon it. Yeah. Yeah. And here's the thing. I'll say this from my own personal experience. I grew up in Chicago. The people that know me know this. And I'm going to sound horribly like a liberal for about 30 seconds. So you just have to forgive me. For those who know me, I'm like one of the most conservative people you'll ever meet. But the idea that we can destroy Normandy or Riverview Gardens is false. We talk, you know, we complain about too big to fail when it comes to businesses, and I believe that there's no business that's too big to fail. We can't fail public education. The bottom line is that 85% of the students in this state are going to go through public education. We can't afford to let them be not educated. The other thing I will tell you is that these North County schools and St. Louis City schools and these really bad economic areas, the transient rate, which means that in some cases these kids are staying in hotels or sleeping in cars, and then 6 months later they're in a new school district because they're sleeping in a new hotel or a new car, or they're living with 6 grandkids in a house. This is not a good situation. And for the 6 hours that these kids are in school, and I'm not kidding, I know I sound like a bleeding heart liberal for a minute, but the 6 hours that these kids are in school are the only 6 hours they are going to have shelter. There's the only 6 hours they're going to get at least one meal. It's the only 6 hours where somebody's actually going to care what they're doing. It's the only 6 hours where they may be hot or cold, and warm or cool, depending on what the outside temperature is. I sat in the speaker's office numerous times, and the idea of not allowing transfers because it was bad for the school district was non-negotiable. Because the speaker believes, as lots of other people believe, or Extreme believes, listen, these kids have a legal constitutional right to a good education. And if they're not getting it, then they have a legal constitutional right to go someplace where they can get it. So taking transfers off the table is a bad idea. Now, having said that, the other thing that we learned in the process of this is Normandy School District, for example, and I'm going to forget, I think it has 11 buildings. 3 or 4 of which are the ones that are failing. The others meet the accreditation standards just fine. So the new bill says if your district now is unaccredited, the buildings then each building gets accredited individually. And if the buildings pass, those kids aren't eligible to transfer because their school works. The kids whose school doesn't work, they get to transfer. The other problem that was discovered in the process of this was you had kids, because of the transient situation, moving into Normandy for the first time just so that they could transfer to Ladue or somewhere else, or Parkway or Rockwood. Yeah, lots of them. So one of Representative Stream's insistence was, listen, they have to have an eligibility requirement. The ones who've already been transferred get to continue, but any new ones have to prove that they've lived in the district for a year. The governor says he's going to veto it. I'll bet we probably have enough Democrats who will vote with us to override it. 509, by the way, we had 1 Democrat stand with us to override it. Here's the inside skinny. We had as many as 4. Only one. We only needed 1 to take the hit, so only 1 took the hit. But we had to. Just in case you wanted to know that part. Keith English took the hit, but we had 4 others. Other bills that were of interest, I'll try and run through these because I know I'm probably taking up lots of time here. Student Religious Liberties Act. This bill would protect students from being discriminated against their religious viewpoints, engaging in religious activities in a public school setting. Innovation Campus Tax Credit. This will create a tax credit for donations to innovation campuses for programs that advance learning in areas of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And I'm pretty smart and I work on a lot of bills, but I still have to read these because I'll forget something. Other things that were done during the session: rural broadband access. There's like 4 different Senate bills that did that. And the reason for that was that it was passed once before, and a Cole County judge struck it down on, I forget what the technicality was, but so that they repassed it minus the technicality, so that, because for lots of reasons, if you've been out in what some people will call is the other part of Missouri, I don't call it that, I get in trouble, but other people will call it that. There's nothing out there. And so, for people who rely on their cell phones or their, a lot of their car navigation, it's not out there. Not to mention that the schools out there generally don't have it unless they get cable wired in. Let's see, we talked about the 72-hour waiting period criminal code. Something else that was done, which I thought was a no-brainer, I was surprised it got as much pushback as it did, which is Senate Bill 668. There was also a House version of this, the oral chemotherapy access. And this is just a quality of life issue. You know, for anyone who's had cancer, hopefully, I had cancer once, but I didn't have to have chemotherapy or anything, so I got lucky. But, you know, if you have to hook up, install the ports, and you have to do all this stuff, even if it's more expensive, wouldn't you rather just take a pill? I know I would. Yes, ma'am.
I'm a perfect example of that. I had leukemia. And luckily, I could afford to take a pill at $1,000 a month. So, but other people, they would have to have
The ports.
which is terrible. So, of course, I don't know what are the drug companies gonna do now that they put the limit on that. Is the drug company the one that's charging me?
Well, if they want the insurance money, they'll find a way. Usually when you, I mean, and I don't know all the ins and outs on this particular bill, other than I did sit in on a couple of meetings just in the kind of strategic how to get it through the House thing. But, you know, the big argument was that it was going to cost the insurance companies so much more. Worst case scenario, I think it cost them 4 cents per patient per year more. Once you know, like anything, you know, something new costs a lot up front, right? You know, we used to, flat screen TVs were outrageously expensive. Now you go to Walmart and get a 32-inch one for less than $200. The same will happen with the pill. It'll start to compress. And thank goodness, because I mean, I can't imagine. But it's just a quality of life. And then the other one was called the Right to Try Act. It's kind of interesting. And this basically says that terminally ill patients will be granted access to try potentially life-saving experimental drugs. So it's their call. If they want to risk the possible side effects, because it's the last-ditch hope, who are we to say no? It was kind of the philosophy. I mean, there's a legal ground for all that kind of stuff, but I mean, that was kind of the sentiment was, who are we to tell them no? That is the short list of the legislative wrap-up. You can ask me anything you want. If I can't answer, I won't.
Yeah, deal about early voting. I'm very confused about that. Like
You would be the first one.
There's one that's going to be 6 weeks of early voting that the Citizens Initiative started, and then the one that passes only 6 days. Is that what it says?
Yeah. And I'm gonna maybe get it wrong, so if somebody knows better than I do. Huh? She can answer that question. She's the voting expert around here.
There's petitions going around, 3 different petitions that would allow early voting for 42 days or 6 weeks. And depending on the size of the county, they would have to establish a polling place for every 50,000 citizens in the county. The 3 petitions are counties of 175,000 people or more, counties of 150,000 people or more, or counties of 100,000 people or more. So it depends which one of those petitions makes it. For instance, St. Louis County would have to have about 15 polling places open for 6 weeks, where anybody living in the county, anywhere, could vote at any of those places. Keep in mind that in St. Louis County, we have over 600 different ballot types on any big election. They would have to have those 600 ballot types at each one of those 15 locations. It would create a nightmare. It's an invitation to voter fraud. Because of that, huge expense, up to $9 million per election. That's all in those petitions that are circulating right now.
And I'll just interrupt you real quick. So $9 million per election for the early voting. Do you know what the average election costs the state for a statewide election? 7. $7 million for a regular statewide election in the state of Missouri. On average, 6.5, 7.2, but call it 7.
In order to avoid that, the legislation passed an early voting bill that would allow early voting for 6 days only. no multiple polling locations. And they got this, they were able to pass this with the help of with some Democrats. Now, that would also be on the ballot as an issue. This is where I'm coming from. So the early voting that the Republicans passed is gonna be on the ballot to vote on. What about if those petitions make it? If they get
They're
enough
all on the
signatures,
ballot.
they're all on the ballot?
Then you gotta see which one passes, because they're
Right.
competing. And if they all pass, well,
It'll be
that Supreme Court gets to figure it out.
Right, yes.
Who's paying those people, because they're all over at the post office, is someone
It's
paying them?
Oh,
yes,
they're getting
yes,
paid.
big money out of Washington DC and primarily the unions are paying for those petitions. Don't sign them.
Yeah, please don't. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Can you just talk a little bit about the photo ID to vote and the right to work issue?
Didn't pass.
I know.
Yeah, didn't happen. Voter ID, I think the problem is gonna be this.
Didn't the Republicans give in on that in order to get the votes on the early voting bill?
No, that was the paycheck protection we gave in on.
I thought,
it was a 72-hour thing.
You're right.
That's what I am.
The 72-hour abortion, is that what you're talking about?
Did the Senate agree to that one, if you took away the photo ID?
It was, I thought it was the paycheck protection that we killed. Okay, so voter ID, here's gonna be the thing. For voter ID to pass, listen, the Republicans can keep passing it and it's gonna keep not going anywhere.
right.
Until we reach a point where we can message it in a way where the Democrats can't scare every person over the age of 65 that we're trying to disenfranchise them from the right to vote. And when I say over 65, I mean over 65 in the Democratic stronghold areas. They basically, every time that issue comes up, they believe the threat, the lie that we're trying to disenfranchise them. And so they jump up and down and scream. Of course, the inner beltway policy, whatever they want to call them, of course don't want it, because then that makes voter fraud pretty impossible. Not impossible, but makes it very difficult. Trust me, in Chicago they've been doing it for years, even if you have to have an ID. So they don't want that. We have 108 members in the House. We have to have 109 to override a veto. So you're always going to have to get a Democrat right now. And it's just not going to happen.
Would there have to be an initiative petition issue?
It can. You're not going to get the votes to pass it until you can change the messaging. Until you can message it in a way that convinces the group of people that will come out of the woodwork to vote that it's not in an effort to disenfranchise them. And that's going to take money. You're talking a $6 or $7 million statewide issue campaign to try to make that work. Right to work, bottom line, I don't want to speak ill of fellow Republicans. I'll try to stick to the Ronald Reagan rule. For some reason, there's something in the water in St. Charles. Almost all of the Republican members in the St. Charles area voted against right to work. You need 82 to pass. I think the highest number we got to was 78. I will tell you, we probably could have gotten to 82, or probably were at 82, but at that point, the will wasn't there to fight that battle with the other transfer battle and and 509 and some of the other things. And there was a pretty strong belief that people like Rick Stream would be badly damaged by having to take a vote on right to work if he's going to run for county executive. Yes, sir.
Are you going to serve in some advisory capacity for Rick Stream?
That's up to him. That's up to him. To work on his campaign, I'll have to end or suspend my employment with the state for the speaker's office, which if Rick wants that, then there's probably some way to make that work out. But that's up to him.
I'm asking.
He's got lots of capable people
I'm
around.
asking this question because in the press, there are 3 areas where the other side is pounding very hard. One is the personal education of the candidate, Mr. Dooley, told us that he had a college degree someplace in Ohio.
He was a
did
janitor.
not- He did not get it. The second is the release of your tax returns for your income and tax paying records. And this is the kind of issue that they are fighting in the Democratic Party primary at the present time. And the third issue will be how Rick Stream is going to better communicate with the mayor of St. Louis, because Mr. Dooley and the mayor of St. Louis are like a hand and glove. They-
Well, okay, so I was doing official stuff, I'm gonna turn around. So back to the purely, because yours is a purely political question. Okay. My hope is, and I was at, I don't know if there was anyone, or did anyone hear about the county council meeting last night? That was pretty exciting. Dooley and Stenger just beat the crap out of each other for about 6 minutes. It was pretty fun. And I expect that will probably continue for the next several county council meetings. So we'll see what kind of damage they can do for each other. The more damage they do to each other, the better for Rick String. Messaging is going to be the single most important thing that Rick can do. How he messages these things, how he communicates to people, will be very, very key. Finally, in terms of how to reach out to people, I think that Rick's background with being responsible, transparent, fiscally responsible in terms of the budget, his experience with the budget, will play very well, I think, with voters. Dooley is inept. I'll be politically correct. He is inept at best. On his best day, half the people in this room probably could run the county better. Slay will work with other people pretty easily. So I think, I don't think Slay is married to Dooley, except for the fact that he's had to be. And I think if he's free of that, I think he'll operate a little differently. And I'm getting the...
Do we know if Rick has a position on city-county merger? And what is it?
You know, I haven't asked him that question, so I would have to defer to let him. I don't know, I haven't asked.
Okay.
My own position gets me in trouble, so.
Can I ask you the same question I asked her? What do you know about his primary opponents?
Tony Pasosa, I think, is there another primary proponent other than
There's
Tony?
another one.
There's like a third one
I
with
think
like,
Perillo dropped out,
Perillo dropped out.
but there's another one?
Tony Pasosa.
Tony Pasosa's
Just
in.
Tony
Who was here a couple months ago, right?
Right.
Yeah. So Tony, I know is a council member, and I forget what city he lives in. Creveport. He's Creveport. Sorry. I don't know what city he's in, but I know he's a council member. I know he's been involved in the Republican Party to various levels.
He's committee man for Concord.
I couldn't remember if he was still or.
He is
So,
still.
yeah. He's a nice guy. I mean, I'm not going to stand here and say anything bad about him. He's a nice guy, and I like him on a personal level. I think Rick has just got more experience, is what it's going to come down to. He has more legislative experience. He has more fiscal responsibility experience, all that kind of stuff. So, but I can't speak about Tony's background that much, other than when I met him. So, he's a perfectly decent guy. Am I done?
You're done.
He has an impressive background. He's a nurse in the operating room at Lawrence Hospital.
Yeah, in the emergency room.
So he must be very capable.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Rick Stream.
I'm the shorter, fatter version.
Yes. But it was very informative to hear about that.
And like I said, I know it's kind of boring. I didn't know what all pieces you guys would find interesting, so I kind of ran down the list. I'll be around for a little bit if you guys want.
We'll always have wine and cheese.
Always have wine and cheese. I like wine and cheese. Just like at the Capitol. It's always-
Well, thank you all for showing up. Does anybody guess? Go ahead.
I asked Priya's permission, and she allowed me to offer two brand new, out-of-the-box National School Choice Week scarves, direct from the Show Me Institute. I was at one of their programs and they were giving these out and they forced them on me. I know the climate right now doesn't call for scarves, but they're lovely. They are made by the Colorado Timberline Authentic Outerwear Company. So if you know someone or if you yourself would like a school's choice scarf,
Cool.
please see me after the meeting. They're yours.
Maybe you can put
Otherwise,
them on
they-
the table.
I can do that.
People can pick-
Otherwise, they'll be going to some.
They get them out in Jeff City, I already have one,
So
so.
you've got some. So you know,
I got one.
Thank you, Peter.
While people were talking about some voting issues, I was thinking, we could have a meeting, and I could talk about voting issues, there's lots of voting issues, but I'm gonna refer that to something else. But I do want to point out that I'm having a seminar on poll worker training on, forgot, July 19th.
Now, what do you mean? You can get poll worker training at the election board.
Right.
What are you doing that's different from that?
It's a bit more enhanced to tell people how to grow a spine.
Oh. So it's
Because-
kind of a behind the scenes.
Yes.
Okay.
People always complain about voter fraud. One of the best ways to stop voter fraud is to be a poll worker inside the poll and make sure the rules are followed. Don't allow anybody not to follow the rules. We have several people in here that work the polls, they know this. But a lot of times, and we all work in polls like Gretchen and I was Ron and Beth. We all work in poll areas around here. Those polls work pretty efficiently and follow the rules.
Polls before too.
But, and I don't say this to be prejudiced, but there's a lot of areas in St. Louis County, especially farther north, where the rules are not followed, okay? And I have been trying for the past 4 years to find people that will work the polls in North County and North City, and people coming from across the state that don't even live here, that come and work the polls. And the goal is to have better trained poll workers that don't listen to the excuse, oh, that's the way we've always done it. No, we have to follow the rules, right, Ron?
By the book.
By the book. That's how we can stop voter fraud. So anyway, so I want to point out, on July 16, I believe it is, what is the date, Bob? You know? I have a poll worker training session at the Pillar Institute out on Clayton Road, and I'll send an email out. Okay. It's all about poll working and voting rules. Yes.
Send everybody an email.
Yeah, I will. Anyway. I think we're done. Have some wine.
Hi, how are you?